We hear it said again and again, be present or be here now. And that's beautiful. But what does that mean? Why is it important? And how do we do that? It can feel like the idea of being present should somehow be simple or easy. And the reality is that it takes practice. And of course, tremendous kindness and tremendous patience. So first, it's helpful to understand why we might want to practice being present. In any given moment, we have a choice. We can either enter into life completely as it's unfolding right now in this moment, or we can shrink away. We can run away mentally, physically, or even emotionally. Now, of course, there are times where the thing we need to do is take care of ourselves. And if we're ever in a harmful situation, then of course, the best thing to do is to step away. And if you have any questions about that, please go back and watch my talk on setting boundaries. But the reality is that life is happening in this moment exactly as it is. And sometimes those moments are wonderful and beautiful, but a lot of the time they're not. There's discomfort, unexpected changes or challenges, or just the kind of boring things day to day that we go through in maintaining a home or a particular job or tasks we need to get through. So if we choose not to be present, what's the consequence? If we're not present, we end up missing out on our lives. Not just the things that we find uncomfortable or challenging, but also the beautiful things. I know for myself that there's a tremendous power in practicing presence on my mat in a physical yoga practice and also in seated meditation. And those are the times where I really get to hone those skills, bringing my attention back again and again and again. And of course, having a little or a lot of a sense of humor about that, because the mind goes where the mind wants to go. And we know that it's a journey. And that practice really came forward for me. And this is maybe one of the benefits of being present, whether the situation is something you want to be in or not. When my father was dying, there was a time where I visited him, and I was there almost every day, but came to the house in the afternoon. And he was very sleepy at this point, very weak. And he had been in the bathroom for a very long time. And I started to get uncomfortable about that, nervous, and I would go and check on him. And I could tell that some of what was happening was that he would fall asleep. He was comfortable, he was seated, he didn't have to go anywhere. And ultimately what I realized was that he didn't have the strength to press himself back up and make the journey back to his bed. And so after some encouragement, I came and slipped my shoulder under his and said that we would take the walk slowly. But he's my dad. He was always bigger than I was and used to taking care of me. And of course he was afraid of what was happening to him, afraid that I wouldn't be able to bear his weight carrying him back to his bed, and afraid that if he were to fall to the floor, how would we get him back up and what would be required in order to do that? And so in what should have been a short walk from bathroom to bed, it felt like it took hours. And we would stop and he would be worried and scared and we would breathe and I would reassure him and we would readjust. And eventually we made it back. I laid him down on the bed, sweeped his legs up onto the bed and sat with him. And he was heaving. He was out of breath. His breath was fast. His heartbeat was fast and he was gasping for air. And in that moment, I had a choice. I could have run away physically out of that room. I could have run away mentally because I didn't want to see what was happening. Or I could have disengaged somehow and gone into the future and started thinking about what is it going to be like when he isn't here any longer. We're getting close to that time and starting to play out a future without him. Or I had the choice to stay. to stay present to him, to stay present to my own experience, and to enter into this moment fully. And I knew that my practice had prepared me for that point in time. And so I took a breath. And then I put my hand on his chest and I said, breathe with me. And together we started to slow our breath down. And as he regained his center, he looked up at me and gazed so deeply into my eyes and reached a hand up, touched my face, and then put his hand on my heart. And he said, I will always be right here. If I had chosen not to be present in that moment, if I had chosen not to stay, I would have missed out on that beautiful moment completely. And although it was one of the most painful periods of time in my life, because I chose to stay with him and with my experience, I have a treasured, beautiful memory that I get to call on anytime I miss him or I wonder where he is or how he's doing. I know he's right here in my heart. And so how do we stay present in the face of something challenging or in the face of something really beautiful and overwhelming joy? And what we teach is what we call resourcing. And we do this in yoga classes, but we also do it in meditation classes. So when we feel ourselves out in the world navigating life and we notice that we're no longer actually present, we can do two things. One is first, we can feel where our body is touching something solid. Might be your feet connected down into the earth and really feeling your feet on the floor and knowing yourself grounded, steady, connected to something solid. If you're seated on a chair, it might be your sitting bones connected to the chair or the cushion or the support of your spine. And then the next is starting to turn to the breath. And just in that moment, knowing that you're breathing in, knowing that you're breathing out, because these two things are always happening in present time, your body and your breath. Now, this is all to say that to be present doesn't mean to be without fear, that it takes incredible courage. And we know that word core comes from the root word meaning the heart, that it takes the fullness of your heart to stay there in any given moment. Not just to be with the other person, but to stay with yourself. And that this is what's important in presence, right? That it's your presence that matters, not coming up with some solution if you're there for another person, not fixing anything, because we live in this culture that has this disease of fixing. We think our presence somehow doesn't matter if we're not contributing a solution or an outcome or some sort of strategy to fix. That sometimes the best thing we can do is just sit with another person. Let them know that we're listening, because the deepest form of love we can give is our attention. Hold their hand. Brene Brown touches on this so beautifully when she talks about the difference between sympathy and empathy. That just being there is enough. And this ties into you learning to trust your capacity to be with this, whether it's your own experience or the experience of another person. And for us really to take solace in knowing that we're not alone in the fact that being present and remaining present is a practice. I love to think about the story of the Buddha, who was visited by Mara throughout the course of his life. And if you're not familiar, Mara was the god of illusion, so things like greed and anger and lust. And even after the Buddha attained enlightenment, Mara would come and visit him. There's a beautiful story of the Buddha's attendant, Ananda, coming to the Buddha one day and saying, "Oh, Buddha, Buddha, and Mara is here again," and very afraid that Mara was there visiting. And Buddha would say, "Invite him in for tea." And the Buddha would sit down with Mara, so metaphorically sitting down with his greed, his illusion, his lust, whatever it might be, and inviting that part of himself to tea. And so we know that if that's true for some of the greatest figures in history, culture, spirituality, of course it's going to be true for us that we keep coming back to these parts of ourselves again and again and inviting ourselves back into what's really here right now. Because that's what insight meditation or Vipassana practice, that's the definition of it. It means to see things as they really are. That when we're willing and courageous enough to practice presence, we get to be in this life right now as it actually is. And there's power in that, because then we get to the end of our lives and we realize we were really there for every part of it. Open, loving, courageous, growing, strong, steady. All the qualities and maybe the core values that you're hoping to bring forward by continuing to have a practice or deepening your practice. If this is something that you're interested in working with more, I really invite you to read the book 5 Invitations by Franco Staszewski. I think he captures the power of presence beautifully. And his first invitation is, don't wait. Don't wait. Don't wait till something tragic happens. Don't wait until you get a diagnosis. Don't wait until you lose somebody. Don't wait until you get to the end of a career or a big moment of transition. Enter into life fully now. And with that, the second invitation is welcome everything and push nothing away. That all of life belongs, all of the different experiences, the ones that we label as good, equally so the ones that we label as bad. That every part of it is a part of life, and all of us as human beings are going through this myriad of experiences. So push nothing away, welcome all of it. His third invitation is to bring your whole self to the experience. And then every piece of you, the part of you that really wants to be there, the part of you that doesn't, the part that's scared and the part that's joyful, that you just bring all of yourself there. And there's vulnerability in that, and there's so much beauty in that. The fourth invitation is to find a place of rest in the middle of things. Now we have to have that opportunity to settle, to resource ourselves, to use those skills of tuning back to our breath, feeling our feet connected to something solid, tuning into our bodies, our hearts, our moment-to-moment experiences. And in that awareness, we can find a place of rest, no matter what it is we're experiencing. That even in the midst of tumult, we can have one moment, we can have one breath, and we fall back in again, and we know that awareness is holding us. And then the last invitation is to cultivate don't know mind, which means that we don't know if this is good or bad. We don't know if it's right or wrong. And we don't know the final story. And so in some way, for all of us, at the heart of our practice, the deepest intention of our hearts as we continue to practice is to have that openness to life, that openness to each other, that we can receive it all. And so I invite you to practice and to know that it's a practice. It's not perfect, it's ongoing. And observe yourself today with a lightness of heart, with a sense of humor. When are you present? And when do you notice that you've fallen away? And what does it take just in the flash of that moment of awareness to bring yourself back? Is it just a single breath? Is it acknowledging to the other person, oh, gosh, I'm so sorry. I got lost in a train of thought. I missed what you said. Would you mind repeating it again? And taking ownership for your presence, for the quality of your attention and your listening. So practice this week, resourcing yourself, knowing your body, knowing your breath, knowing this moment fully, and equally so, acknowledging the moments where the best thing for you to do is to consciously step away and take care of yourself. So that if you choose that this is not a moment that you can be present for, it's not something that you're running away from unconsciously or reacting to, it's something that you're going into with a deep understanding of what self-care means and what you are capable of being present to right now, so that it's imbued with kindness. I hope this has been supportive to you in your practice, and get on your mat, move your body, do some yoga, get an embodied experience of it, or go for a walk, get out, do a hike, and then come and sit, do a meditation. And then from those places, take your practice from outside this place out into the world and share it with everybody that you interact with.